Okay, everyone, we're about ready to start. Welcome on behalf of Mark Curley, our owner, heading into our 50th year of existence. My name is Michael, the events coordinator. Thanks for coming. Again, as I mentioned before, we have Devorah, John, and Gretchen behind the counter to sell Rodney's book. So tonight we're here to talk about Rodney Chow, but we have a few quick announcements. Restrooms are through the computer humor aisle all the way through the back of the store. I do ask that you silence your cell phones to give Rodney our undivided attention at this time, which I think I put mine on mute. Is your phone off there? Because all your fans and stuff. Okay, we have, if you'd like to be on our email list for upcoming events, please give it to our staff there. We don't solicit your email, we just add you to an email list and we'll send you weekly upcoming events, which you can see behind you on the board there. We have 4 events coming up in the next couple of weeks, starting with DJ Jones. You may recognize him as a longtime Trader Joe's worker who works just down the street. Following that, we have Kemper Donovan and Academy Award nominated screenwriter Irish Yamashita. They have Gorilla books. She wrote the screenplay for Letters from Iwo Jima. After that, I think it's on the 22nd, we're going to welcome Peter Bernstein, which his father is Elmer Bernstein, the famous composer. He wrote a book about him. He'll be coming up. And then at the end of the month, we'll have Elon Musk. We're actually not going to have Elon Musk. We're going to have Zoe Schiffer, who wrote a book. She's a local author, but she got a really big book deal. It's kind of a big deal about Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter. So anyway, let's begin. Oh, before I forget, as you can see, this is being filmed for our YouTube channel, so it'll be up shortly after program's completion. So for those who missed it, tell them to go to the Chaucer's Books YouTube channel. Tonight I'm very, very pleased to welcome my buddy here, Rodney Chow. Rodney was born in San Francisco, 5th generation Chinese American.
Yes,
right?
5th generation. We've been here close to 200 years.
Wow. We'll talk about that later too. And he's a proud U.S. Army veteran, graduated from USC with bachelor's and master's degrees in civil engineering.
Right.
After a long career as a civil engineer, he retired and became a farmer, as most of us know. And he is probably the oldest farmer in the history of Santa Barbara Farmers Market. Yes. His previous book was American as Apple Pie. Tonight we're going to talk about stories of the good old days. Please give a hand to Rodney Chow. Welcome. It's been a great, I'm glad, a long wait for us.
Well, it's quite an honor. And I want to thank all of you for braving the rain. And I want to tell you the stories in this book that I wrote is about what I could remember growing up in an ethnic neighborhood in Los Angeles. And it's about the good old days when we children were out the streets playing with no worries in our mind while our parents were struggling to survive the Great Depression. And I wanted the stories to remind all of you folks about your good old days, to bring back the memories. And I also wanted to show that we all have something in common. And what we have in common is our childhood days. Then I also wanted to share the story of three 13-year-old boys that met and became friends for a lifetime. They were Lucky Godwin, Joe Kinda, and me. And Lucky Lucky's parents left Oklahoma in a wagon pulled by a donkey, and they joined the mass migration of the Okies coming to California. The story that Steinbeck wrote about the grapes of wrath, well, his family was one of them. Joe Kinder's family came from Hungary, and they lived in Cincinnati in a Hungarian neighborhood, and he spoke Hungarian before he spoke English. My father was a sharecropper in the Sacramento Delta, and he farmed 80 acres of Bartlett pear. What the three of us had in common was that our parents all came to Los Angeles to get a new start in life after losing every dime they had in the crash of 1929. I forgot what I'm gonna say here, but I suddenly forgot what I'm gonna say. But anyway, I wanted, yeah, I wanted these stories to, I wanted these stories to show you that if we concentrate on what we have in common, that we would all have a pretty nice life together, instead of concentrating on our differences. And that's the whole spirit of this book. So I had the two stories, the one of the childhood days, where we all had in common, we all played as children. And then I have this other part where the three of us grew up together. Oh, and the three of us, we went to high school together. We were all veterans of the Korean War, and we were all successful in our careers. And the whole part of that story is about the good times we had together. Lucky died 20 years ago, and Joe died last year in February. So if you put all this together, the childhood days plus the three of us together, it will emphasize what I just said. Let's concentrate on what we have in common.
You bring that up a lot in your book.
Right.
I want to actually first start when your family came over, because, you know, I'm sixth generation on my mother's side. It came over during the railroads, and however, your family came in the early part of the 1800s first to Oregon.
Well, what happened was that back in 1812, this young teenager was herding ducks in a village. And the merchant ship who came into Hong Kong was looking for a cabin boy. And so they kidnapped him. And he was shanghaied on a boat. And when he reached land, it was at the coast of Oregon. So he jumped overboard, swam the shore, and he lived with the Indians.
Wow.
And he married an Indian woman and had a son. And for a short time, I thought we had American Indian in our ancestry, but it didn't happen that way. After he had the son, he went back to China and married again and got another son, and he sent that son back to America to look for his Indian family, and they couldn't find him. And that son was the one that worked on the railroads near the town of Colfax, and they were the Black Powder group that blasted the Greta Hills. And he also did some gold panning, and he struck gold, but he didn't recognize it because he was only looking for nuggets, and what he found was gold dust. And so he didn't register his claim, and so another miner came in and took it from him at gunpoint. And so the family story goes like this. It was a good thing because right after that fellow stole the claim from our great grandfather, he got killed by another fellow who stole it from him. And if that didn't happen, that would have been the end of our line. So that fellow was my grandfather's father.
Wow. How did you find all this information?
We talked to all the relatives, and some of it my grandfather wrote, but we couldn't read Chinese,
Yeah.
you see, so we just had to depend on what my aunt told us. And then there's different variations too, and you just took the best ones.
Is that where most of your stories came from? Were they oral stories
Right.
that you passed down?
Yeah, and I have that in the front of my book, because, and the reason I put that in the front of the book, because every time they meet me, they say, when did you come over here? And so I said, well, 200 years ago. And so I thought, well, I'll put that in the book. But and there's another thing too I want to say about this book here. All the stories that I wrote in this book is all about having something in common, except for one story. It's a little different, and I'm not going to tell you about it because I want you to read it. But I'll tell you this much about it. I titled it The Watts Riot. I was there when the Watts Riot happened.
65.
And I'm not gonna tell you a thing about it. You're gonna have to read that, because it's not what you think. You're gonna be surprised.
It's the best chapter in the book.
Yeah.
So they have to buy the book.
Right.
Yeah. You remember not only sights, but sounds, touch, feeling, smells, and even tastes. I think when you were talking about your godfather's chow mein.
Oh,
And are these are they very vivid in your mind still?
oh, he was really a cook, I'm telling you.
I can tell by the sparkle in your eyes.
Those were the really good days when I had my godfather.
Well, what would he do to make it so?
Well, he used to take me. He was one of the original Chinese noodle factories in Los Angeles, and he made the fortune cookies. And incidentally, everyone thinks fortune cookies are invented by the Chinese. It was a Japanese bakery in San Francisco who put that together, and he couldn't make a go of it. And this Chinese fellow in this restaurant took it and put a fortune in it and folded it up, and it became a success. So the real originator is a Japanese bakery, although the Chinese got the credit for it.
So, you spent most of your life in Los Angeles before coming here, but you were born in San Francisco.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you remember much, because you said, you wrote about growing up on Stockton Street and Chinatown.
Well, the only thing I know about San Francisco is what my mother told me, because we came down to Los Angeles in about 1930.
Okay.
I was only about 1 year old, and so, yeah. But we did travel to see my grandparents once in a while. But other than that, I don't really know much about San Francisco, because even though I was born in San Francisco, our family really started in the Sacramento Delta,
Okay.
and that was the town of Locke.
So, but you managed, since this is Chinese New Year's coming up,
Yeah.
or Lunar New Year as it's known as well, if you can just talk a little bit about your culture, Chinese American culture while living in Los Angeles.
Well, it's really what we grew up in my particular generation, we really didn't belong to anything, because we had one foot the way our parents raised us, and that was the old Chinese style. And then we had the other food, which we picked up in school, which was the American style. So we were really halfway between this and halfway between that. And so we were just in between. And we were just a subculture. And that subculture that we had was all centered on San Pedro Street, where I grew up in. And San Pedro Street, some people call that the Chinatown, but that wasn't a Chinatown. It was a neighborhood of immigrants. And we had Chinese, Japanese, Mexicans, and white folks. And the white folks that were in there some of them were the original families that were there.
Wow.
But there weren't too many of them left. And then the other white folks were the people that came in from Oklahoma. But they were the poor ones. Everybody was poor. And we didn't feel anything about being poor because everyone was just as poor as the next fellow, and we didn't have television to show us what other people had more than us. And so we were all happy.
So you all got along.
Yeah, we all got along, and we played. There was no difference. I can still remember that one family was they were Yugoslavs, and then I used to play with a little girl, and she always loved to play Mama and Papa, and I had to be Papa, and I got my basic training because she really bossed me around.
So you were trained then.
Yeah.
That's great. What I really like is the common thread that you together that everyone will see when they read, but also just about being in Los Angeles and the images that you strike. And there's a little part that I really liked, something about the red car, the old trolleys that were built at the turn of the century up to about 1960 or so. And I was wondering if you wouldn't mind reading that part.
Yes, see, we live in that section of town where the Huntington had the red lines. There was the red lines and the yellow cars. And the red lines were the one that carried all the workers from downtown to the suburbs. And back in those days, it was segregation, you see. It was our neighborhood where all the poor people lived, and then the downtown, the salespeople and all that, they were all the white people who lived in Pasadena, Sierra Madre, and that time Watts was all white, and Long Beach and Santa Monica, and right around 4 o'clock, it was just like the freeway is right now. Everyone got on the red line, and they'll go to these little Alhambra and all these little towns. They all went through that one intersection of 9th Street and San Pedro. So we saw most of those red lines.
Yeah.
And when we wanted to go to the beach or Long Beach or Santa Monica, we took the red line. And if it was more convenient, if the red line happened to go where we wanted to go, we took that because it cost only 5 cents to drive the red line and 7 cents to ride the yellow car.
Okay. Would you read a little?
Sure.
Starting in maybe right there.
Okay.
And there's like 3 pages that we'll read. Then we'll take questions from the audience.
One day while I was walking to school with some friends, I heard a streetcar coming and saw it slow down. The driver kept clanging his bell and waited for us to get on. It was our gym teacher. I did not know he had a second job driving a streetcar before coming to Lafayette School to teach gym. Well, those were the days, was 1942, 1943, when everyone held 2 or 3 jobs. And there was a shortage of men. And so those that were too old to serve in the military, they like our gym teacher, he would be driving the streetcar in the morning, and then afterwards he would get up and he would teach school. Well, what happened was that that streetcar came right along the street where we were walking to school. And so whenever he saw us, he'll clang the bell, keep clanging, and we got a free ride to school.
You want to keep reading, or do you want to answer questions?
Let's ask some questions.
All right.
Yeah. What schools did you go to? What schools did you go to in Los Angeles, your high school?
High school, I went to John H. Francis Polytechnic.
Oh,
You know,
Are you at the Poly?
I went to Poly. I wasn't in that school district, but I'll tell you a little secret. This is one of the reasons why my grammar is so bad, because I never had any grammar education. And the reason for that is that I was in a school district that was all black, and the teachers wouldn't teach us anything. And so I never had any grammar training. And so what I did was, at the 9th grade, I wanted to get out of that school, and I couldn't because we were not in that district. So what we did was, my uncle had a grocery store that's right over the line. And so we just told him we lived there. So we went to John Adams on false pretenses. And we went to Poly on false pretenses. And in order to stay out of trouble, we went to school even though we were sick. So they wouldn't find out that we didn't live in that neighborhood.
Explain a little bit, Rodney, about your getting together with the Jewish people in Boyle Heights, and some of the relationships you had and some of the problems that you had.
Well, that's right. See, back in those days, every ethnic group had a piece of the pie in Los Angeles. You even had a French group, and that's where the Union Station is right now. And that was Tay's Restaurant. Everybody loved to go there. And Boyle Heights,
On Sunset Boulevard.
Boyle Heights
before
was
that.
the second settlement of the Jewish people. They came from Central Avenue.
Yeah.
And the black people came into the Central Avenue, and the Jewish people moved to Boyle Heights. And from Boyle Heights, they moved to Fairfax.
Yeah.
Wow.
And a few of them escaped to Santa Barbara, like
You have a question over here?
Well, I just a comment and maybe sharing. When I was 9, 10 years old, living around Silver Lake and Sunset and Alvarado and all that, I used to go fishing at Echo Park.
Oh, yes.
And the other day I went by there just to remember what was going on, and there were these kids fishing. And I said, I used to go fishing here and this and that. And they looked at me like I was the oldest guy in the world.
Well,
But that was some of my growing up, and it was a great time.
Well, I want to tell you a little bit more about the neighborhood I grew up in, and that's where I wrote this book based on. It was a very unique neighborhood, and it was a mixture of all second generation people, and mostly, except for the people from Oklahoma, they were all bilingual, and we were more comfortable speaking in English, although we understood the other language. That neighborhood survived mainly because of the garment industry and the city market. That's where they got their jobs. The city market was a wholesale consignment where the farmers brought in the produce, and it opened from 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock, and all the buyers would come in, and by 9 o'clock everything was sold, and then they'll come down to San Pedro Street, where the Chinese and Japanese and a few white folks had their business, all dependent on the workers coming from the city market. And what happened to that neighborhood was that when the supermarkets came in, the buyers no longer bought from the city market. So the city market died. And when the city market died, the neighborhood died. And that's the reason it's no longer there. And then besides, the city also made I think it's a huge mistake, but they had urban renewal. And back in those days, urban renewal was demolition.
Yeah.
And you had a tag on your house, and you had to tear down your house.
Wow.
And so it's a neighborhood of vacant lots.
Any other questions? Go ahead, yeah.
Could you talk about the farming aspect? I understand you are a farmer as well?
Oh, yes, I have 5 acres out there by, it's the third ranch from the Polo Grounds. And, when we first were looking for a place to buy, and, we heard about the 5 acres being for sale, so we took a look at it and we grabbed it. And when we got it, there was nothing on it. We had to bring the gas in and the water in. And, the greenhouses of Gilpin Stripping, they were there, but on the north side where we are, except for one house, one of the Van Wingertons had their house built, and they had gas and they had the water, but next door, we didn't have it. So we actually brought the utilities in. And I didn't know anything about farming, but I didn't want to do what everybody else did. I didn't want to do avocados, and I didn't want to do chirimoyas. So I went to the different conferences and started investigating. And I found out that some of the houses in the neighborhood had apple trees. And I said, you know, you can grow apples here. And so I started an apple farm. And I had up to about 400 trees.
Oh, my kind of apples.
But now we're down to about maybe 100 trees. And we're mostly now plums, close to 200 pomegranates, and about 60 plums.
So you're living in Carpinteria?
And lately we have a herd of deers coming down from the hills, and they're consuming everything we're growing.
They took your crop.
That's why I haven't been able to go to farmer's market for half a year. They ate up the whole crop.
Wow.
That's in Carpinteria, right?
Right,
Yeah.
Carpinteria.
But later in your life, you started something else. I mean, you're a civil engineer, successful.
Oh,
You're a farmer, and now you're a writer. And,
well, I sold real estate.
oh, you did that too. Okay. But you've already got a third book in the works.
Yes, yes.
And what's the subject here?
Well, the third book has a moral to it, but it's really fantasy.
Has a moral to it.
And I use it, the title of it is The Astronauts Lost in Space. And what it is when they were lost in space, they wrote a diary, just in case they've been found, so
Yeah.
someone will know what happened.
Yeah.
And they landed in a planet that no one knew anything about.
Mm.
And so it's
So-
really fun writing
Science
that one.
fiction, right?
It's
It's a science fiction.
Well, I
novel.
started to do science fiction, and then I had one of the fellows in our writers group, and he preached up and down and said, this is science fiction, you know, and he said, you have to follow certain rules, but I'm not gonna follow any rules in my book. And
So I start now.
yeah, so I said, well, to satisfy him, I'll just call it fantasy. And he was happy.
Well, Rodney, thank you so much for joining us and talking about stories of the good old days, everyone. Thank you again, Rodney Chow. So we'll sign books, come on up and line up as soon as I turn up. What? Here.